The marble floor gleams like a mirror beneath the relentless fluorescent lights, cool and pristine, as a man in worn jeans pushes through the glass doors of the downtown financial tower, patches bleeding across the knees, threads unraveling at the cuffs like secrets escaping. Every head swivels. Every eye settles on him with the weight of judgment. His hands tell the story, weathered by labor nobody acknowledges, calloused by work done in shadows, gripping a plastic card with trembling reverence as though it might dissolve in his fingers. "I just wanted to check my balance," he whispers to the teller, his voice steady and low, a man rehearsing these words 1,000 times in his mind. From the executive lounge draped in mahogany and silence, a millionaire in a tailored suit laughs, sharp, dismissive, the kind of laugh that erases people. Her assistant smirks. They've witnessed this exact moment before. Desperate, pathetic, predictable. The teller's fingers move across the keyboard. Then they freeze. On the screen blooms a number that shouldn't exist. $2.8 million. The entire floor crystallizes into silence. The millionaire rises slowly from her chair. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that a man with nothing had already become everything to someone. And the truth about to emerge would burn every assumption she'd ever built her life upon. Robert Hayes has perfected the art of being invisible. It's a skill you learned when you work 3 jobs and sleep in the gaps between them. When your existence becomes a blur of clock-ins and clock-outs, of floors swept at midnight and shelves stocked at dawn. He is 53 years old, though his face wears the lines of someone twice that age. The mirror in his small apartment tells him nothing he doesn't already know, that his hair has turned silver, not from wisdom, but from worry, that his eyes have learned to apologize even when he's done nothing wrong, that his hands, those hands, have become the only honest thing about him. This Sunday morning was supposed to be different. Little Emma, his 10-year-old daughter, had asked him a simple question over breakfast. "Dad, why don't we ever have money like everyone else?" He'd watched her stir her cereal, the spoon moving in slow circles, waiting for an answer he didn't have. She wasn't asking out of anger or entitlement. She was asking because she'd noticed. Children always notice. She'd seen her classmates' new shoes, heard about birthday parties at restaurants instead of in their living room, watched her father count coins in the kitchen when he thought she was asleep. The honesty of her question had gutted him. So he'd made a decision, a small decision really, but the kind that changes everything. He would check his balance today. He would look at the exact number, and maybe, just maybe, it would tell him what he needed to know about whether they were getting closer to okay. The bank tower rises 40 stories above the downtown district, all glass and steel and the quiet hum of wealth. Robert has walked past it 1,000 times on his way to the cleaning supply warehouse where he works his second job. He has never been inside. Banks, he's always felt, are places built to remind people like him that they belong anywhere but there. But this morning, with the card in his pocket, the card his late friend had given him months ago, he decided that today he would walk through those doors. The bank manager had called him after Dorothy Sinclair's death, saying there was a card associated with his account, a gift of sorts. Robert had been too overwhelmed to ask questions. He'd simply held on to the card like a man holding onto a piece of driftwood in dark water, not quite believing it would keep him afloat. The glass doors slide open with mechanical precision, and the cold air of the lobby wraps around him like judgment. The space is cathedral-like, soaring ceilings, marble that echoes with emptiness, the kind of silence that only money can buy. Every head turns as he enters. He feels it immediately, the weight of their eyes, the invisible calculation happening behind every glance. Worn jeans, scuffed work boots, the faded jacket he's owned for 6 years. He's a stain on their morning, a disruption to the carefully curated order of their world. An older woman in a designer coat turns to her companion and whispers something. A young executive adjusts his tie. A receptionist's smile becomes slightly more professional, slightly more distant. Robert has learned to expect this. He has learned to move through spaces like this the way a ghost moves through walls, present but not acknowledged, there but somehow not real. He approaches the teller desk, and even his footsteps seem too loud, too permanent, too much. The young woman behind the counter, her name tag reads Jennifer, looks up with the practiced politeness of someone trained to be kind to everyone and warm to no one. "Can I help you today, sir?" she asks. And there is nothing in her voice that suggests she actually cares about the answer. Robert slides the card across the counter. His hands are shaking slightly, though he cannot explain why. Perhaps it is the weight of the question Emma asked. Perhaps it is years of being treated like a ghost, finally catching up with him. Perhaps it is the simple hope, dangerous, foolish hope, that for once the universe might surprise him. "I just wanted to check my balance," he says quietly. And in those 7 words lies the entire story of his life. 7 words, so simple a child could say them, and yet they contain everything. The exhaustion, the persistence, the refusal to stop trying, even when trying feels like pushing a boulder uphill with bare hands. From his seat in the executive lounge, separated from the main floor by mahogany walls and velvet rope, Marcus Chen watches the scene unfold. He is the bank's vice president, and he has seen this moment play out before. The man will be polite, awkward, grateful for any small kindness, probably overdrawn, definitely struggling. But there is another witness to this moment, and she is watching from a different vantage point entirely. Caroline Whitmore sits in the private consulting lounge, draped in $2 million worth of real estate holdings, corporate stock portfolios, and the kind of reputation that precedes her the way a storm precedes itself. She is 62 years old and has forgotten what it feels like to want for anything. At least, that is what she has told herself for the past 30 years. She is dressed, as always, in tailored perfection, a cream silk blouse that costs more than Robert's monthly rent, slacks that fit her body like they were sculpted by artists, shoes that have never touched a surface that wasn't carefully chosen. Her assistant, Derek, sits beside her with a portfolio full of investment opportunities, but Caroline isn't listening. She is watching the man in the lobby below, with the kind of detached amusement that wealthy people are taught from birth, the amused observation of someone looking at an ant trying to move a crumb. "Did you see that?" Derek asks, glancing up. Caroline nods, barely suppressing a smile. "Check my balance," she murmurs, repeating Robert's words with a theatrical inflection, as though the number might have changed, as though miracles exist. Derek laughs, a practiced, hollow laugh that echoes in the executive lounge. They have witnessed this exact moment before, the desperate, the hopeful, the pitifully optimistic. It is almost endearing in its predictability. Almost. Caroline has built her fortune on the predictability of human nature, on knowing what people want and charging them more for wanting it. She has never been surprised by humanity. She has learned, through decades of experience, that kindness is a luxury item, and those who cannot afford to be kind should simply not bother trying. She watches as Jennifer, the teller, inserts the card into the machine. The routine is always the same. The slight pause, the small printout of information, the gentle smile as they explain to another struggling customer why their overdraft fees exceed their balance. Caroline takes a sip of her mineral water, imported from a glacier in Iceland, of course, and settles in to enjoy the quiet schadenfreude of observing someone else's disappointment. It is a small pleasure, she has decided, but a pleasure nonetheless. A moment of validation that she made the right choices, that her ruthlessness in business was actually wisdom in disguise, that people like Robert Hayes are simply less capable, less ambitious, less deserving of abundance than she is. But then something happens that has never happened before. Jennifer's fingers freeze over the keyboard. Her eyes widen. The color drains slightly from her face. She blinks, as though she is not quite certain what she is seeing. She types again, pauses, blinks again, and then, slowly, she turns back to Robert with an expression that Caroline cannot quite place, not from this distance, not through the mahogany walls and the carefully maintained distance between her world and his. "Sir," Jennifer says, and her voice has changed. It has lost its professional distance and taken on something else, something that sounds almost like awe or confusion, or perhaps the particular shock of witnessing something that makes no logical sense. "I'm going to need to double-check this. The system is showing, well, it's showing $2.8 million. There is a pause, a moment so pregnant with impossibility that time itself seems to hold its breath. $2.8 million, she repeats, as though saying the number again will make it make sense. "In your account, associated with that card, all available to you." The floor seems to tilt. Or perhaps that is simply Caroline standing up too quickly from her chair. Derek is beside her immediately, his hand touching her elbow, concerned about her balance, literal balance this time, though they both know she means the metaphorical kind. She moves toward the railing that overlooks the lobby floor, no longer bothering to maintain her composure. Around the bank, the reaction spreads like a virus. The receptionist stops typing. The customers waiting in line turn to look. The security guard adjusts his stance, suddenly uncertain. A woman with a Louis Vuitton purse actually gasps. And Robert stands very still, his hands gripping the edge of the counter, and he is crying. Not openly, not dramatically, but his shoulders shake slightly, and his eyes are wet. And he looks like a man who has just been told that gravity has stopped working, that the world no longer operates according to the rules he has lived by his entire life. "Is this correct?" he asks Jennifer, and his voice is so small, so fragile, that it barely carries. "Is this real?" And that is the question, isn't it? Is it real? Can money appear from nowhere? Can a bank account suddenly contain more than you have earned in your entire life? Can the universe surprise you after decades of teaching you not to hope? Caroline watches this moment unfold, and for the first time in 30 years, she feels something shift inside her chest. Not sympathy. Not yet. But the first small crack in the armor of certainty she has built around herself. The first whisper of a question she cannot answer. What if I have been wrong? The rumors begin before Robert leaves the bank. They spread like wildfire through the lobby, mutating with each telling, becoming increasingly absurd. "Money laundering," someone whispers to their friend. "Has to be." Another voice. "Drug cartel. I'm telling you, he's definitely drug money." A businessman in an expensive suit pulls out his phone, likely already composing an email to the bank's fraud department. The security guard shifts his weight from foot to foot, unsure whether he should approach Robert or maintain distance, unsure, essentially, whether Robert is a victim or a perpetrator. This is the nature of sudden wealth for those who did not earn it in ways society recognizes. It immediately renders you suspect. It places you outside the normal categories that people use to organize their understanding of the world. Jennifer, the teller, is also struggling. She has been trained to handle normal banking situations, deposits, withdrawals, account transfers. She has not been trained for this. She pulls up the account history with shaking fingers, looking for some explanation, some logic that might make sense of the numbers on her screen. The account was opened 3 months ago. The card was issued in Robert's name. The money, all $2.8 million of it, was transferred in a single deposit exactly 60 days ago. There are no other transactions, no withdrawals, no activity at all. Just a number, a fact, a rupture in the normal order of things. "Let me get my supervisor," Jennifer finally says, and her voice suggests she is not certain whether she is about to solve a mystery or uncover a crime. Robert feels the weight of their suspicion like a physical thing. He is used to being looked at. He has learned to move through the world as a man who is accustomed to being seen and dismissed simultaneously. But this is different. This is not dismissal. This is suspicion. This is the sudden realization from all these strangers that Robert contains something inside him that they do not understand, that he has become, in the span of 5 minutes, an enigma instead of an afterthought. A woman in expensive heels actually moves away from him, pulling her purse closer to her body. A man in a business suit turns away deliberately, and Robert, who has spent his entire life trying to take up as little space as possible, suddenly finds himself occupying too much of it. He does not defend himself. He does not have the energy for it. And more importantly, he does not quite believe it himself. He simply stands there, holding the receipt that Jennifer has printed for him, staring at the number as though it might disappear if he blinks. The receipt shows not just the balance, but also contact information, an office address downtown. There is a law firm associated with the account, a name he recognizes, Dorothy's name. Suddenly, the pieces click into place, but they make such an impossible picture that Robert has to lean against the counter to steady himself. Dorothy, his friend, the woman he and Emma visited every Sunday for the past 2 years at the community center, the woman who had smiled at them with such grateful surprise that anyone would spend time with her, that they had become, over those months, her family in all the ways that mattered. Dorothy had mentioned a lawyer once, months ago. She had squeezed his hand and said something cryptic about making sure Emma is taken care of, but Robert had dismissed it as the rambling of a woman who was increasingly aware of her own mortality. He had thought she meant perhaps a small gift, a few $1,000s maybe, enough to help with Emma's school needs. He had not expected, could not have imagined, anything like this. The loss of Dorothy hits him again, fresher this time, as he realizes what she has done. She had given him, in her last act on earth, not just money. She had given him the most generous gift possible, the chance to stop struggling, the chance to breathe. But for now, Robert must navigate this current moment. He must deal with the growing suspicion around him, the spreading rumors, the sudden transformation from invisible to suspect. A manager, a woman named Patricia with a severe expression and a clipboard, finally appears. She pulls Robert aside, away from the lobby floor, away from the watching eyes. "We'll need to verify this account," she says, her tone suggesting that verification might take a very long time. "There may be paperwork involved. We'll need to speak with the associated law firm, just to confirm everything is legitimate." This is corporate speak for, "We think you're a criminal, but we're too polite to say it directly." Robert nods and provides the lawyer's name. He has no other choice. Meanwhile, upstairs in the executive lounge, Caroline is making phone calls. She has already spoken to the branch manager. She has already demanded copies of all the documentation. She has already begun to construct a narrative in her mind, a narrative that suggests fraud, manipulation, perhaps even elder abuse. She is doing this not out of any genuine concern for bank security, but because she cannot accept what she is witnessing. The universe rewarding someone who has never earned its rewards through the proper channels. Someone who has not accumulated wealth through business acumen, ruthlessness, and the willingness to step on others to reach the top. Someone who has simply been kind and received kindness in return. The thought is so disturbing to her so fundamentally contrary to everything she believes about how the world works, that she must find a way to invalidate it. "This is clearly fraudulent," she tells Derek, pacing back and forth across the plush carpet of the executive lounge. "No one receives $2.8 million from nowhere. It's impossible. There has to be something we're missing. A court case, maybe. A settlement. Stolen funds." Derek listens, nodding in all the right places. But he is thinking something different. He is thinking that Caroline seems almost afraid of the implication that wealth and kindness might actually exist in the same person, that good things might happen to good people without deserving it in some ultimate cosmic sense. He is thinking that his boss, for the first time in their working relationship, seems uncertain of something. It is an unsettling observation. Robert leaves the bank 3 hours later, still in possession of his money, but now also in possession of a new weight. The weight of suspicion. The weight of people who do not believe his story. By evening, rumors have reached the local news. A producer sees a social media post from someone who was in the bank. A story begins to form. Local man claims account contains $2.8 million. Possible fraud. Possible money laundering. Possible criminal activity at downtown bank branch. Robert's phone begins to ring. Numbers he doesn't recognize. People asking questions. His boss at his third job, a gas station where he works nights, calls him asking if he's aware of any pending legal issues. "We need to know if there's anything that might reflect badly on the business," his manager says carefully. But there is one person Robert calls, and that is Emma. She's at school in 6th period when her phone buzzes with a text message. Dad says stay calm. Something good is happening. "We'll pick you up today." Emma has been raised to not ask too many questions. She has learned, as children of struggling single parents often do, that life is complicated and that sometimes information is a luxury. But she is a smart girl, smart enough to know that something has shifted. Smart enough to notice that her father's voice sounds different when he picks her up from school. Different not just in tone, but in fundamental composition. It sounds like someone who is just beginning to believe that breathing might get easier. That night, for the first time in months, Robert cooks a real dinner. Not instant ramen or rice with beans. Real food. Chicken. Fresh vegetables. Bread from the bakery. Emma watches him cook with eyes full of questions that she does not quite ask. They eat in near silence, and then Robert puts her to bed and sits alone in the kitchen with the receipt that Patricia printed for him. The receipt that says, in black and white, $2.8 million. He looks at it until the numbers blur, until it stops making sense, until it seems like perhaps he has been very tired for a very long time, and this is a dream he will wake from. But he does not wake up. The morning comes, and the receipt is still real, and the money is still there. 2 weeks pass. 2 weeks during which Robert receives 3 separate phone calls from the lawyer representing Dorothy's estate. A man named Mr. James Hartwell, with a voice like warm oak and the tone of someone who is accustomed to delivering news that changes people's lives. He explains with careful precision exactly what Dorothy Sinclair has done. She has liquidated the majority of her personal assets, real estate holdings, investment portfolios, corporate stocks, and placed the proceeds into a trust account with Robert's name on the card. She has left a letter. A letter, Mr. Hartwell explains, that was to be delivered in person by Mr. Hartwell himself, should Robert wish to hear its contents. Robert asks him to read it. He is sitting in his apartment, in the kitchen, with Emma doing homework at the table. Emma has learned, in these 2 weeks, not to ask questions. She has learned that her father is processing something large and strange and possibly wonderful. She simply lets him be, understanding in the way that children understand such things, that sometimes adults need to sit with silence. Mr. Hartwell clears his throat, and then he reads Dorothy's words, written in her hand, months before she died. When she could still hold a pen without trembling. Robert, if you are reading this, it means I have left your world. I hope you know that you did not fail to save me. You cannot save people, but you can love them, and you did. You and Emma walked into my life when I had stopped believing that anyone would ever do such a thing again. You sat with me. You listened to my stories. Emma read to me. You made me laugh. You made me feel, in my final days, like I was not just a woman waiting to die, but a woman who mattered to someone. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. I have spent my life accumulating things. Money, properties, stock. I thought these things would define my life. I was wrong. What defines my life is not what I accumulated, but what I gave. And I want to give to you the only thing I have left that might make a difference. I want you to stop struggling. I want Emma to go to any school she chooses. I want you to know, beyond any doubt, that kindness matters, that it is rewarded, that the universe, despite all evidence to the contrary, is not entirely indifferent to good people. Be kind, to yourself and to others. That is the only instruction I am leaving you. Everything else is commentary. When the letter ends, there is a silence. Robert is crying, not quietly this time, but openly, his shoulders shaking with the force of it. Emma looks up from her homework, and without saying anything, she gets up and puts her arms around her father. She does not ask what the letter said. She simply knows that something profound has shifted in their lives. And her 10-year-old heart understands that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply be present with someone in their grief and joy. But while Robert is reading this letter in his small apartment, something else is happening in the downtown bank tower. Caroline Whitmore has received her own phone call. She has received word that the account is legitimate, that Dorothy Sinclair, who was indeed a wealthy businesswoman, did indeed liquidate her assets, that she did indeed place the entire sum into a trust for Robert Hayes, that there is no fraud, no crime, no manipulation, only a choice made by a dying woman to reward kindness, a choice that rewrites everything Caroline thought she understood about how the world works. She sits in her office on the 38th floor, looking out at the city sprawling below her, and she realizes something that genuinely frightens her. She has built her entire life on the assumption that people are essentially selfish, that love is transactional, that kindness is a performance, that the only way to matter is to accumulate more than everyone else. And in that moment, looking out at the city, she realizes that she might be wrong. Catastrophically, fundamentally wrong. She pulls up Robert's name on the bank database. She reads his account history. She looks at the records of his employment, 3 jobs, all minimum wage or slightly above. She does the math. She realizes that for 2 years, while working 3 jobs, Robert and his daughter have spent every Sunday with a dying woman. Every Sunday. Without compensation. Without expectation of reward. Without any assurance that anything good would come of it. They simply showed up. They simply loved. Caroline sits at her desk, and for the first time in her life, she is not certain what to do. She is not certain what to believe. She is not certain of anything. And that uncertainty, that crack in the armor, begins to widen. The story breaks nationally within a week. It is too perfect to ignore. A single father working 3 jobs, taking time every week to care for an elderly woman, who dies and leaves him her entire fortune. The narrative is clean, compelling, heartwarming. News outlets eat it up. Robert becomes, temporarily, famous. There are interviews. There are journalists who want to know his story. There are people who reach out to him through social media with their own stories of hardship, of struggle, of the desperate hope that perhaps their own sacrifices will be rewarded. Through it all, Robert remains humble. He does not celebrate. He does not boast. He simply walks through his new reality with a kind of stunned grace. He quits his 3 jobs. He enrolls Emma in a better school. He begins to spend time simply existing, a luxury he has not allowed himself in years. He sits in cafes and reads books he never had time for. He takes Emma to movies. He sits in the sun. He learns, slowly, to not expect punishment for being happy. But he does something else, too. He reaches out to Mr. Hartwell. He asks the lawyer to help him establish a foundation, a nonprofit that focuses on supporting single parents, on providing scholarships, childcare support, mental health services, all the things he has needed over the years and could not afford. Within 6 months, the Robert and Emma Hayes Foundation is providing assistance to over 200 single parents in the city. This is where Caroline Whitmore finds him. She does not contact him through official channels. She simply shows up one day at the foundation's modest office, in a building that is not downtown, not prestigious, not the kind of place where millionaires typically spend their time. She walks in without an appointment, and Robert, who is sitting with a young mother trying to figure out childcare options, looks up. He recognizes her immediately. He has seen her photograph in business journals. He has read articles about her acquisitions, her ruthlessness, her rise to the top of the business world. "Robert Hayes," she says, and her voice is different from what he expected. It is smaller, more uncertain, more human. "I'm Caroline Whitmore. From the bank. I was there when... I was present when your account was first." She trails off. She, who has spent decades giving presentations to boardrooms full of intimidating men, cannot quite complete a sentence. "I owe you an apology," she finally says. "I did not believe your story. I assumed you were a criminal. I assumed the worst about you because I have spent my life assuming the worst about everyone. And I was wrong." Robert stands. He offers her a chair. He listens as she tells him about her own story, about a childhood of scarcity, of clawing her way up, of learning to trust no one, of building walls so high that nothing good could get in either. He listens as she explains how, watching his life, she realized she had missed something essential. That kindness wasn't a weakness to be exploited. That love was not a transaction to be managed. That perhaps the reason she had accumulated so much and felt so little was because she had never learned to give without expecting something in return. "I want to contribute to your foundation," she says, "not because I want recognition, not because I want a tax write-off, but because I need to believe that the world works the way you have shown me it can work. I need to believe that people matter more than portfolios." And so begins an unlikely friendship. Caroline becomes the foundation's largest donor. She brings her business acumen, her connections, her resources. But more importantly, she brings her own journey of transformation. She begins to volunteer at the foundation. She meets with single parents. She listens to their stories. She begins, slowly, to understand that the greatest wealth is not in bank accounts, but in connection, in being seen, in mattering to someone. Months pass. The foundation grows. Robert finds himself featured in more articles. But this time, the articles are not about the money. They are about the work. They are about the lives being changed. They are about a man who turned his own struggle into a pathway for others. Emma, now thriving in her new school, decides she wants to work in the foundation too when she grows older. "I want to help people like Dad helped Mrs. Dorothy," she tells Robert one evening. "I want to make people feel like they matter." Caroline sits in her office. She has moved it to a smaller, less prestigious building, closer to the foundation's headquarters, and she looks at photographs on her walls. Photographs of families that the foundation has helped. A woman who went back to college. A man who started his own business. A child who got the medical treatment she needed. These photographs have replaced the stock market reports and acquisition documents that used to decorate this space. And Caroline realizes that, at 63 years old, she is finally beginning to live a life worth living. The circular journey completes itself on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 year after Robert walked through the glass doors of the downtown bank tower. He stands in the lobby again, but this time, he is not alone. Emma stands beside him, holding his hand. Caroline is there too, and Mr. Hartwell, and a small group of people whose lives have been touched by the foundation. They have come because Robert has decided to do something. He has decided to return to the place where his transformation began. He walks up to the information desk. The receptionist looks up, and her eyes widen slightly as she recognizes him. "I'd like to check my balance," Robert says. And there is something in his voice that is different from a year ago. Not uncertainty now, gratitude, completion. The receptionist smiles, a genuine smile, and directs him to a teller. They walk through the lobby, and the eyes that turn to watch are no longer full of suspicion. They are full of recognition. They have all seen the news. They have all read the articles. They all know who Robert Hayes is now. But Robert does not walk differently. He does not carry himself with arrogance or pride. He simply walks like a man who has learned that kindness is not weakness, that struggle is not shame, that being seen and known is the truest form of wealth. At the teller desk, a different teller this time, Robert slides his card across the counter, just as he did a year ago. Just as he did when he was invisible and desperate and holding onto a thread of hope. "I just wanted to check my balance," he says, and Emma laughs softly beside him, because they both know that the number in the account has changed. Not because Robert has taken the money, he has barely touched it, but because he has given so much of it away. He has used it to help others. He has transformed it from a number on a screen into real lives changed, into children educated, into parents given breathing room, into a community strengthened. The balance reads $1.4 million, half of what it was. But Robert does not feel diminished by this. He feels expanded. He feels, perhaps for the first time in his life, truly rich. Not in money, though the money is there, but in purpose, in connection, in the knowledge that his life means something, that Emma's life means something, that the time he spent with Dorothy meant something, that all the sacrifice, all the struggle, was not wasted, but transformed into something beautiful. After the bank, they walk outside into the morning sun. The downtown towers shimmer above them, glass and steel reaching toward an indifferent sky. But Robert no longer feels diminished by these buildings. They are just buildings, constructed by people, filled with people who are struggling in their own ways. He thinks about Caroline, who has learned to measure wealth differently. He thinks about Jennifer, the teller, who he later learned has started volunteering at a homeless shelter after witnessing his story. He thinks about how one person's kindness can ripple outward in ways that cannot be predicted or controlled. Emma tugs on his hand. "Dad, are we going to the community center?" she asks. The community center where they had met Dorothy, where they now spend Saturday mornings volunteering with other elderly residents, where they have learned that the greatest gift is presence. Robert nods, and they begin to walk. Behind them, Caroline follows, no longer the millionaire in the mahogany-draped lounge, but simply a woman learning to live. Behind her, Mr. Hartwell. Behind him, the small group of people who have been touched by the Hayes Foundation. They walk through the streets of the city, and the city notices them. Not because Robert is rich now, but because they walk with a kind of purpose, a kind of grace, a kind of love that is tangible and real and undeniable. They walk like people who have learned something fundamental about what it means to matter. They walk like people who have discovered that the greatest balance sheet in life is not measured in dollars, but in connections. Not in acquisitions, but in memories. Not in power, but in presence. That evening, sitting in his apartment, the same apartment, though he could move now, but he chooses to stay because this is home. Robert reads a letter that arrived in the mail. It is from a young man named Thomas, whose daughter has benefited from the Foundation Scholarship Program. Thomas writes, "My daughter asked me how she could thank you. I told her that the best thanks would be to do what you did, to give kindness freely to others." She has started a tutoring program at her school. I thought you should know that your kindness is spreading like seeds. I thought you should know that you are changing the world. Robert folds the letter carefully. He places it in a box with all the other letters he has received. Letters from lives changed, from struggles eased, from hope restored. He thinks about Dorothy, and he knows that she would be pleased, that she would recognize in this box full of letters the truest form of wealth she could have left behind. In the end, the story of Robert Hayes is not a story about money. It is not even a story about luck or fate or the universe providing. It is a story about what happens when someone chooses kindness, what happens when that kindness is met with recognition, what happens when recognition transforms into action, what happens when action ripples outward in ways that cannot be contained. It is a story about the true balance sheet of a life, not what you accumulate, but what you give, not what you take, but what you leave behind. And in that equation, Robert Hayes discovered that he was, and had always been, infinitely rich.